Beneath the waters of the Great Lakes lies a forgotten fleet, evidence of a growing nation frozen in time. Wood and iron preserved in the cold depths of this fresh water. I welcome you to sit back and enjoy as we explore the shipwrecks of Alcona County. The shores of Alcona County are a fraction of the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. It is the only national marine sanctuary in freshwater and home to nearly 100 discovered shipwrecks within its 4,300 square mile boundaries. We focus our view on an 875 square mile stretch off the coast of Alcona County, a place where the human cost of building a nation was paid in full. The fears of all sailors, storms, reefs, fires, fog, and collisions all happened along these shores. Many of the wrecks left families fatherless, mothers losing sons, and abrupt ends in family trees. The wrecks presented are those that are confirmed as resting on the bottom in the locations that are shown. Many more have been reported happening in this area, but no information confirming that they've been discovered and documented could be found. A list of those undiscovered ships will be shown at the end of this presentation. Today, the wrecks are more visible than ever, thanks to an unlikely source, invasive quagga mussels. They've filtered the water to a crystalline clarity. This is perhaps the only benefit to these tiny invaders. Before the sprawl of the interstates and the iron grip of the railroads, these waters were the arteries that moved the lifeblood of the 19th century. Coal, iron ore, lumber, grain, and people all traveled upon these waters. But like any highway, there were locations of catastrophic accidents. The traffic was relentless. Records from the Sturgeon Point Life-Saving Station reveal that on September 24th of 1878, 59 vessels total passed by these shores. By 1881, Tawas Point Lighthouse reported that during one season, 10,456 vessels passed by during the day, and probably as many passing during the nighttime. Busy highways without lanes, a recipe for disaster. To understand the scale of these vessels, here's a horse and carriage between two schooners that washed ashore in Lake Superior. These schooners are massive, stretching 200 feet long and over 30 feet wide. As more and more detailed navigational maps were developed, safety along the shorelines improved, but collisions offshore soon became very common. It took until 1907 for the Lake Carriers Association to establish upbound and downbound shipping lanes, having them separated by at least 5 miles of open water. Many captains stayed hugged to the western shore. This approach allowed them to find refuge quickly in case of trouble. That tactic also brought them directly into the jaws of hidden reefs. An 1891 map carries a chilling handwritten warning. The map's referring to the area off Old Alcona. It possibly reads, "Shoal, water 17 feet. John Shaw struck and sank," said by Captain Haddock. The most notorious of these ship-grabbing reefs off Alcona County are located off the mouth of the Black River, and this is where we will begin our tour, starting with the 8 shallow water wrecks that are in less than 15 feet of water, easily explored from kayaks or small boats. Off the mouth of the Black River, just north and east of Black River Island, lies the Alvin Buckingham, a 2-masted schooner. Schooners are sail-powered, harnessing the wind. This ship had its share of stories before its end. It had many leaks, groundings, sinkings, and was even struck by lightning. 6 years before the logging town of Black River was established, on October 15th of 1870, while carrying a load of iron ore, it sprang a leak south of Thunder Bay. In an attempt to save the vessel, the captain made a run toward shore, sailing up onto the reef just north of Black River Island. This reef extends 1¼ miles from shore and about a half a mile out from the island. The crew abandoned the ship and were rescued by a passing steamer. Through the years, the waves have broken it apart. The sides and parts of the deck are still visible in 8 feet of water. 35 years later, on May 2, 1905, the 3-masted schooner William H. Rounds was driven into the same reef by a powerful storm, coming to rest only 550 yards from the Buckingham. The Rounds had made news earlier in the year when on March 6 the body of a man named William Bradley was found beneath the stern of the vessel while docked in Detroit. Mr. Bradley had last been seen on December 28th in a saloon. He'd been missing for 3 months. At that time that it struck the reef, the Rounds was carrying a load of coal. The crew safely escaped, but the storm pounded the ship to pieces. The hull remains fairly intact. It now rests in 11 feet of water. As the age of sail transitioned to steam, sailors traded the unpredictability of wind for a new internal terror: fire. Just as a steam locomotive showers sparks from its stack, so too did the ships. Sparks from the smokestacks were a constant threat. These early steamers were floating tinderboxes, consuming 3 to 5 cords of wood every hour. This fuel had to be carried on board or loaded at each port. These early days were during an age when safety equipment was almost non-existent. A single spark could transform a journey into a disaster. Further south, resting on the northern edge of the southern reef off Black River, lies the steam barge Loretta. Today, her grave is marked by a mooring buoy placed by the Marine Sanctuary staff, but her journey to the bottom was a long and precarious one. A vessel of perpetual misfortune, the Loretta survived many trials. She once sank off East Tawas, only to be raised and repaired, and later sprang a leak that grounded her near the mouth of the Osable River in Oscoda, where she was salvaged and mended once again. Her luck finally ran out on October 7, 1896. While en route from Buffalo, New York to Grand Marais to collect lumber, she stopped at Black River to deliver a load of heavy chains to the massive logging operation of Alger Smith & Company. The end began beneath the boiler, where a fire ignited and spread with uncontrollable speed. The flames leapt from the ship's hull to the nearby docks, which were already laden with shingles and lumber awaiting transport. The resulting inferno was devastating, consuming 50,000 board feet of lumber, 15,000 shingles, and 210 feet of the dock itself. While still engulfed in flames, the Loretta was towed out into the open lake. There she burned to the waterline and finally slipped beneath the surface. She now rests in only 7 feet of water, serving as a shallow water playground for snorkelers and paddleboarders. Just 66 feet to the north and east of the Loretta lies the reported resting place of the Mackinaw, a small steam barge with a long history. She was originally built in 1866 as a sidewheeler before being converted to a more modern propeller-driven vessel in 1877. Though she is said to rest near the Loretta, the Mackinaw met her end 6 years earlier. According to the Port Huron Daily Times, on Wednesday, October 29, 1890, the ship had just finished unloading at Black River when she was consumed by fire. To protect the dock, she was cut free, drifting and burning across the water until she finally settled into the lake bed. The only cargo that went down with her was 10 tons of coal. Today, the Mackinaw remains a mystery. No known images of the ship have ever been found, and despite her recorded sinking, the wreck itself is also no longer visible. Whether the Mackinaw was salvaged in the years following her loss, or remains entombed beneath the ever-shifting lake sands, she's effectively vanished, leaving the Loretta to keep watch over the reef alone. Continuing south to the opposite side of the reef, we find the final resting place of the Ishpeming. Like her neighbor to the north, her location is marked by a mooring buoy, serving as a silent headstone for this once sturdy 3-masted schooner. The Ishpeming was a vessel that seemed to constantly wrestle with the elements, surviving a long history of collisions and groundings. Her career was defined by narrow escapes. In 1901, she sprang a leak so severe that the crew was forced to man the hand pumps all through the night just to keep her afloat. Newspaper reports from the time noted that the female cook pitched in alongside the men, working with equal fervor to save the ship. The year 1903, however, brought a somber end to her story. After her captain mysteriously passed away while on board, the Ishpeming finally met her fate on November 29, 1903. Bound for Alpena with a heavy load of coal for the local cement plant, she ran hard aground on the Black River Reef. Despite efforts of tugs to pull her free, the water was too shallow for them to gain leverage. She was eventually stripped of her valuables and abandoned to the lake. Further still, along the southern shoreline, lies the city of Alpena, a steam-powered mooring tug that belonged to the fleet of George L. Caldwell of Harrisville. Her end came swiftly on August 9, 1880, when a fire broke out and consumed the vessel. The crew managed a narrow escape via lifeboat, watching from the water as their ship burned down to the waterline. While her boiler and engine were later salvaged for parts, the city of Alpena remains a fascinating sight for modern explorers due to her unique posture. The ship rests completely upside down on the lake bed. Because of her position, only the outer hull, the drive shaft, and the propeller are visible to those above. Marked by a mooring buoy, she rests in just 9 feet of water, offering a clear window into the steam era for anyone passing over her remains. Continuing south, we encounter the most legendary of the Alcona wrecks, the Marine City, a grand steam-powered side paddle wheeler. She was a vessel designed for both heavy freight and the burgeoning business of passenger travel. In those days, safety of the Great Lakes was simply a matter of makeshift ingenuity. Because smokestacks constantly spit sparks, decks were lined with buckets of sand, strategically placed axes to chop away burning timbers, and fire pumps and hoses were kept below deck. Life preservers were often nothing more than stacks of wooden planks for passengers to grab before leaping overboard. It wasn't until the Steamboat Inspection Service Law of 1852 that the wearable life vests we recognize today became a requirement. The Marine City was celebrated for her fine accommodations and her bishop's arches, graceful, elegant structures built to prevent hogging, the drooping of the bow and stern when on top of a wave, and sagging, the drooping of the midsection when between waves. After 14 years of safe passage, the Marine City met her end on a late summer afternoon. She had departed the Alcona dock at 3:30 p.m. on August 29th of 1880, bound for Port Huron from Mackinaw. A fire suddenly erupted in the boiler area. The disaster was compounded by a fatal lack of maintenance. The onboard fire hoses were completely disconnected, and the pump valves had rusted completely shut. Rescue arrived in the form of the tug Vulcan, the fishing tug Grayling, rowboats from the town of Alcona, and the crew from the Sturgeon Point Life-Saving Station. While 141 to 145 passengers survived the inferno, the exact death toll remains a mystery. The only passenger list burned with the ship. Estimates range from 9 to 14 lives lost, including 4 unidentified bodies, later recovered from the hull, thought to be stowaways, a mother and her infant, to whom she'd tragically given birth to amidst the smoke and flames, 11-year-old Jeannie Mosser, whose scorched shoes were kept by her family for generations as a somber heirloom. The survivors were taken in by the people of Alcona, who were commended for their hospitality, providing food, clothing, and shelter to the traumatized victims. The remnants of the Marine City lie in less than 3 feet of water, approximately 1 mile north of Sturgeon Point Lighthouse. In a strange twist of fate, the tug Vulcan, which had saved so many that day, met a similar end just 3 years later, burning off Vermilion, Ohio. A local legend persists even today. It's been said that at midnight, on the anniversary of the tragedy, a mysterious light appears over the water where the ship went down. If you stand near Sturgeon Point at midnight on the night of August 29th and scan the waters to the north, you may just catch a glimpse of the light that guards the ship. As we arrive in Harrisville, we encounter the Northern Light, perhaps the most accessible wreck in the region. Tucked just south of the DNR boat launch within the Harrisville harbor, it rests in a mere 2 feet of water, another member of George Caldwell's historic fleet. The Northern Light began her life as a proud propeller-driven steamer, ferrying passengers and freight to the ports of Lake Superior. As the years passed and the industry shifted, she was eventually converted into a hard-working barge for the lumber trade. Her decline began on August 22, 1881, when she sank off Greenbush in 12 feet of water. Though she was initially recovered, she ran aground again the following year. By November 2, 1882, the Detroit Free Press had reported that the salvage pumps were being sent back to Port Huron. The Northern Light would stay where she was. Abandoned to the elements, the ship was slowly broken apart by wave action over the next 2 years. History took a strange turn in the late 1950s into the early 60s, when the Harrisville Harbor of Refuge was constructed. The harbor walls were built directly around the remains, inadvertently shielding the wreck from the open lake's fury. Before this protection, the ship had faced one final indignity. Local teenagers, seeking warmth while swimming, were known to occasionally set the sun-bleached timbers ablaze. The final shallow water wreck on our journey south is the Detroit, a barge dedicated to the transport of lumber and coal. Her career ended violently on September 29, 1872, when a catastrophic storm swept her onto the shore. It was a devastating day on the Great Lakes. By October 2nd, only 2 days after the Detroit was grounded, at least 30 bodies from various wrecks had washed ashore between Harrisville and Tawas. The attempt to save the Detroit a few weeks later proved just as ruinous as the storm itself. Salvage crews attempted to raise her using a system of chains and pontoons, but as she was being towed, the strain became too much. 2 chains snapped, and a third, still under immense tension, sliced the ship entirely in half. Today, all that remains is the turn of the bilge, the flat area of the bottom, and her sturdy support keelsons. We now will explore further offshore to the 6 wrecks in over 100 feet of water. These are only accessible to trained divers. As we leave the shallows and move into deeper waters, we enter a realm viewed only by those with technical scuba experience. Here, the Great Lakes preserve their prizes in cold, dark silence. 7 miles offshore and just south of Harrisville lies the John L. Shaw. It was a 3-masted schooner that had been downgraded to a coal barge. Her end came during a sudden snowstorm on November 13, 1894. While being towed across Lake Huron by the steamer John F. Eddy, the tow line snapped, leaving the Shaw helpless and taking on water. The crew managed to escape in a lifeboat. They were rescued several hours later by a passing steamer. In 1895, the wreck had been located by a salvage company, though never recovered, and soon faded from memory. Then, in July of 2007, local fishermen John Gauthier and Tom Spaulding stumbled upon the site while setting their nets. Today, she sits in 130 feet of water. Her hull is almost completely intact, a rare jewel for experienced divers. Even further out, in the crushing depths of 230 feet, lies the W.C. Franz, a steel motorized bulk freighter. The France met her end on November 21, 1934, after being rammed by the Edward E. Loomis in heavy fog. According to her officers, a steering failure caused the France to veer directly into the path of the Loomis. The disaster is notable for the ship's use of early telegraph technology. Her final frantic messages read, "We are sinking rapidly and taking to the lifeboats. SOS, Halfway Bay and Thunder Bay, now leaving for lifeboats." Tragedy followed the crew into the water. As the lifeboat was being lowered, a rope snapped, dumping 12 men into the lake. 2 vanished instantly. A third lost his grip while being pulled towards the rescue ship and fell to his death. A fourth man jumped onto a floating hatch cover he'd thrown overboard to use as a raft. He landed directly on the cover. The impact killed him instantly. When discovered, she was mistaken for the Hydrus, and she is the first steel freighter found resting perfectly upright on the lake bottom. Returning to the waters off Black River, we find the Corsair. She fell victim to the same ferocious storm on September 29, 1872, that drove the Detroit into the Greenbush shoreline. A two-masted schooner, heavily laden with iron ore, bound for Oswego, New York. The Corsair was no match for the gale. 5 of the 7 crewmen perished in the waves. The story of her final moments survived only through the harrowing accounts of the 2 survivors, who were eventually plucked from the wreckage by the propeller boat, the City of Boston. This is their story. On a cold Saturday evening near Thunder Bay Light on Lake Huron, the schooner Corsair sailed north under Captain G.H. Snow of Oswego. The rising storm soon became a violent gale. By midnight, huge waves swept the decks as the heavily laden vessel, carrying 50 tons of iron ore on the deck, began taking on water. The crew fought desperately at the pumps, shortened the sail, and reefed the mainsail, hoping to save the ship. Captain Snow turned towards the safer waters of Tawas Bay. For a time, conditions improved, though water already stood knee-deep on the deck. The crew threw ore overboard to lighten the vessel, but at 3 a.m, the wind shifted, and the storm returned with renewed fury. Despite double-reefed sails, the mate reported that the pumps could no longer keep up. They would never reach Tawas Bay. Captain Snow ordered the schooner brought head to wind until daylight, but the Corsair no longer answered the helm. Water, filling the hold, left her helpless, and she fell broadside into the trough of the sea. Waves crashed over her until the men stood waist-deep in freezing water, with barely a foot of rail above the lake. 7 people were aboard. As panic spread and Elizabeth Kelso's screams mingled with the storm, Captain Snow ordered the yawl lowered. Rady rushed to free the boat, but a davit jammed. Climbing into the yawl, he cut the tangled ropes with a knife, and at that moment the deck cargo shifted to leeward. The Corsair lurched violently and plunged bow first beneath the waves. The last sound was Elizabeth Kelso's piercing scream, a sound the survivors would never forget. Dragged under with the sinking ship, Rady thought he was drowning, but suddenly surfaced beside the shattered yawl. There he found another survivor, Thomas Foley, who had somehow been swept clear of the wreck. The damaged yawl barely floated, but Foley pulled the exhausted Rady aboard and lashed him to a broken seat. At dawn, they spotted the floating quarterdeck and cabin roof of the Corsair. Using a broken board as a paddle, they reached the wreckage and clung to it while the storm continued to rage. Waves rolled the debris again and again, hurling the men into the icy water and forcing them to scramble back aboard. Splintered timbers and wreckage surrounded them. At one point, the body of Elizabeth Kelso drifted silently past in the foam, a grim reminder that they were likely the only souls left alive. For the rest of Sunday, the 2 men drifted helplessly, nearly 40 miles from land. The cold gnawed at them hour after hour. Their hands became numb, their muscles stiff, and even speaking required effort. They watched the gray horizon for any sign of rescue, but saw only endless water and breaking seas. By afternoon, they were certain they'd never see home again. Several ships appeared in the distance, each bringing a surge of hope, only to vanish beyond the horizon without seeing them. Around 3 o'clock, a steamer of the Evans Line finally saw their wreckage and turned toward them. Salvation seemed at hand, but as the rescue vehicle battled the towering seas, the storm nearly rolled her over. Forced to abandon the attempt, the steamer disappeared back into the gale. The sight shattered the men's last confidence. Exhausted and freezing, they wept openly. As darkness closed over Lake Huron, they believed they'd been abandoned to die. Certainly, they would not survive the night. They exchanged final messages for their families and friends in Oswego, asking that their words be carried home if only one of them should somehow live. The long night that followed seemed endless. They drifted alone in the darkness, unable to see land, a ship, or even the horizon. Each wave threatened to tear them from the wreckage. Sleep meant death, yet staying awake became a struggle. More than once they thought the end had come. Morning brought no relief. Ships appeared far away but passed unnoticed. By afternoon, their strength was nearly gone. Foley had lost hope entirely, and at one point tried to release his grip on the wreckage and surrender himself to the lake. Grady refused to let him. He shouted at him, cursed him, threatened him, and even struck him, forcing him to hold on. Both men knew the truth. Without rescue, neither would live to see another sunset. Then, at about 3:30 p.m., nearly 20 miles from Sturgeon Point, they saw smoke on the horizon. At first it seemed like a cruel illusion, but the smoke grew larger. The propeller, City of Boston, commanded by Captain Brown, had seen them and their signal. After 36 hours adrift, between hope and despair, the frozen survivors were finally pulled aboard. Inside the warm cabin, the survivors were slowly fed and their frozen limbs rubbed for hours before feeling returned. And only then did the full reality of their survival sink in. 2 more grateful men had never been seen, for had rescue come only a few hours later, the wreckage would likely have carried not survivors, but 2 more bodies. Today, the Corsair lies silent beneath the waters of Lake Huron, resting in 182 feet of water, roughly halfway between Black River and Old Alcona. A quiet grave beneath the waves, and a reminder that on the Great Lakes, the line between survival and tragedy is often no wider than a sailor's outstretched arms. Moving further north off Black River, we find one of the region's more modern casualties, the W.H. Gilbert, a motorized bulk freighter carrying coal towards Wisconsin. Her end came on May 22, 1914, in the shroud of a dense Lake Huron fog. Though both the Gilbert and the steamer Caldera had been sounding their fog signals for 15 minutes, the 2 vessels collided with terrifying force. The Caldera struck the Gilbert midship, nearly cutting her in half. In a desperate bid for survival, the Gilbert's captain ordered the hatches removed and tossed into the lake to serve as makeshift rafts should the lifeboat fail. Fortunately, all 23 mariners were safely transferred to the Caldera. However, as the Caldera backed away, she unplugged the massive gash in the Gilbert's hull. Within 3 minutes, the freighter slipped beneath the waves. Today, she rests in 225 feet of water, largely intact except for the impact site and her toppled smokestack. Almost due west of the Gilbert lies the Egyptian, the deepest wreck in this journey, at a depth of 232 feet. A prototype for the massive 1,000-foot freighters that now dominate the lakes, this coal-laden steamer was lost to fire on December 1, 1897. The rescue effort was nothing short of heroic. The life-saving crew at Sturgeon Point rode 35 miles round trip in 0-degree temperatures to reach the burning ship, and by the time they arrived, the other vessels that had gathered to help had vanished, leaving the crew alone in the freezing cold. While the crew was saved by the Sir William Fairbairn, the fire itself was unstoppable. In a tragic irony, the very water pumped onto the ship to douse the flames eventually became too heavy, dragging the Egyptian to the bottom. Most of the crew lost everything they owned, although an old German sailor managed to escape with only his cherished violin. For the owner, Nelson S. Whipple, the loss was devastating. After paying off his bills, he was left without a penny to his name. Further out, in the deep water, lie 2 very different vessels. The H.P. Bridge, resting 215 feet down and 30 miles east of Harrisville, was a triple-masted barkentine. With her square sails, she resembled the pirate ships of legend. She sank on May 11, 1869, after a collision with the steamer Colorado. She carried a cargo of 65,000 white bricks destined for the construction of Grace Church in Detroit. Her loss delayed the church's completion by over a year. The furthest out, and not within my designated area, lies the New York, a package freighter that caught fire on October 1, 1910. She's 40 miles out, just 5 miles from the Canadian border. Uninsured and abandoned, she remains one of the most distant sentinels of the Alcona shoreline. Today, these wrecks are more visible than ever thanks to quagga mussels. These invasive filters have cleaned the water to a crystalline blue, but they come at a cost. They blanket the wrecks in thousands of pounds of weight, slowly weakening the historic timbers. The damage that they're doing remains to be seen. After surviving all of these years, these giants may be taken down by tiny mussels. The reefs of Black River continue to claim victims even in the modern age. As recently as June 5, 2025, a 43-foot trawler out of New York ran aground on the same treacherous shallows that claimed the Ishpeming. Like the rescuers of the 1800s, the sheriff, the Coast Guard, and DNR crews struggled against the shallow water to reach the vessel, proving that the lake's power remains undiminished. The Shipwrecks of Alcona County are a submerged museum of ambition, industry, and the enduring power of the Great Lakes. Thank you for watching. If you'd enjoyed this tour, I encourage you to visit the Alpena Maritime Museum to see their excellent exhibits, or take a glass-bottom boat tour to see these giants for yourself. For more information, the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary website is a fantastic resource for exploring the Shipwreck Alley of Lake Huron. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. Keep watching to see the lists of the unfound wrecks reported in this area.
The sails unfurl as we capture the breeze. The work is beginning, so roll up your sleeves. The ropes are pulled tight as we're underway. The ship, she speeds toward a new port today. The holds are full as the sky turned dark. Hope to make port and a safe place to park. Sturgeon point to our back, making good time today. Approaching Alcona, hoping to make Thunder Bay. The Great Lakes, they are to be feared. Stay straight on the wheel and carefully steer. The freshwater sea that swallows ships whole. Watch for the reefs with boulders below. Watch near Black River, the waters are tough. Here many have wrecked when the weather turned rough. Stay clear of shore, as many have found. Up near the island, you'll run aground. Many a ship still rest here today, fast on the bottom, and that's where they'll stay. The Marine City, Detroit, and William H. Rounds. Many others have never been found. Littered with the ships in the stretch of sea, we hope to avoid the next one we be. Waves over the deck as the weather gets rough. To sail these Great Lakes, you've got to be tough. The Great Lakes, they are to be feared. Keep straight on your course and carefully steer. The freshwater sea that swallows ships whole. Watch for the reefs with boulders below.